This doesn't have to be formal. I just wanted to know some of your stories and your background of Mare Island. I know you talked about moving here with your father in 1945. Where did you come from?
North Dakota.
North Dakota. And he wanted to join the military, or is that?
No, this was after he got drafted in World War II in the Army.
Okay.
And he was 36 years old and had 5 kids. But
wow.
In small towns, that happens sometimes.
So he got drafted at 36 years old?
He got drafted.
Wow.
He was only in about a year. Never left the States. Mm-hmm. In Kansas and Arkansas.
And that's where he was stationed?
Yeah.
In the Army?
Yeah. So he heard there was defense work because he couldn't find work, steady work.
Okay. That was
he grew up farming, so couldn't find steady work. So we moved when he got out of the Army in 1945 to California to hopefully find permanent work.
How did you feel about that? You were a kid, right?
Oh, yeah, we were all kids.
Was it exciting or not so much?
Probably not. We left our grandparents for one thing, which was hard.
Yeah.
To do. Although most of my relatives left North Dakota too because of the weather, the winter weather.
Yeah, I'm originally from Texas, and my parents split up when I was 6, so I was similar.
Yeah.
I went with my mom to California.
Yeah. So, I suppose any move was exciting. New school and everything.
Yeah. You came directly to Mare Island at that point?
He did, yeah. There was no housing.
Okay.
There was no housing in Vallejo, and they directed us over to Bayo Vista, which is an older part of Rodeo.
Yes.
And there were brand new housing for government employees that were built. Their apartments built for government employees. Now it's kind of not a real good area anymore. Right. But at that time, the apartments were brand new.
Okay.
So,
what was the reason there was no housing in Vallejo? This wasn't
because of wartime. Vallejo was packed with military and civilians.
Okay. So no free apartments there.
Yeah. So they weren't free, but they were brand new apartments there, and they were nice.
Right.
And we were used to outdoor plumbing, and
Right.
So it was very nice to have a new apartment, and we were only there in July, September, about 4 or 5 months that we lived there, and then we moved to San Anselmo for my dad to work at PG&E, and he worked there till he retired. So he got what he came for, permanent work.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And then where does your history fall in with Mare Island as far as working?
Well, we moved to Vallejo when my husband started working at Mare Island.
Okay.
He was in the Air Force on Tamalpais.
Yeah.
And when he was discharged, then he was trying to decide what to do. And my sister's husband was already working at Mare Island, and he was in an apprenticeship. And he said, look into that because you get your schooling at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so you go to school and you work and you get paid for it. So he looked into it, and the rest is history. Yeah. Came to Mare Island in April of 1958 in the apprenticeship. So worked there.
And so at that point, you lived in Vallejo, or?
Then we moved to Vallejo. Okay. It was just the two of us then. So we found an apartment one weekend, went around with a realtor, found an apartment one weekend, moved the next weekend. In those days, you didn't have to have, all this background check.
Right. Yeah.
And so we moved into a duplex, and we lived there April till end of October.
Oh, okay.
And then we bought our house, and we're still in that house.
And that is in Vallejo also?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from 58, he worked here, and then when did he transition to going to Mount Sam?
He worked from 1958 until retirement.
Oh, wow.
He retired in 1989.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
A lot of years.
Yeah.
And then you started working here.
I didn't come till 1980. I was home raising kids before that.
Yeah.
And doing a lot of other things. And I decided I had career status in government work because I worked in Marin County. I worked at Hamilton Air Force Base.
No.
So you work 3 years for the government, you get career status. You can be reinstated if they're hiring.
Okay.
And I was able to get reinstated.
That's interesting. So you worked at Hamilton. What part of Hamilton were you in?
4th Air Force. It was out at the far end past the flight line.
Okay.
About a mile from the main gate.
Yeah. I know Hamilton.
I was
pretty well.
clerical.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
amazing what it's turned into a whole community.
Yeah, well,
Can't
that
recognize
part is no longer there. The area where I worked became tennis court for a while, and then probably housing in the area.
Yeah.
I used to go out there when they would have, like Armed Forces Day, when they would have some airplane shows, Wings of Victory, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I'd take my son because he was very much into airplanes. So
Yeah. Travis is having theirs this Saturday.
yeah, well, we went there a couple times too, but it was kind of interesting to take him to Hamilton and show him different sites and
Right.
about where I worked and stuff. And
Right.
yeah, my sister was in the personnel office at Hamilton, but she was already married and gone by the time I came. But everybody knew the last name in the personnel office. Some of her coworkers were still there.
Mm.
So when they recognized the name, they bent over backwards to help me.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
That's important that you know all those connections, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are your stories or memories you have of working on Mare Island?
My memories?
Do you have some good times, bad times?
Yeah, mostly good times. I liked Mare Island. I liked Mare Island has so much history.
Yeah.
And the workers were so enthusiastic about their work.
Mm-hmm.
And they were proud of their work. And so being in personnel, I met a lot of them because they would come in for help with, various things.
Yeah.
And so it was a good feel because I got to meet.
At the point you were working, what was were they working on submarines or what were they mainly working on?
They weren't building new ships anymore at that time because I didn't come till 80. So
right.
10 years before they stopped building new construction, but they were doing overhaul, repair, refueling.
Okay.
And at first I worked down in the machine shop just in the office. And then a few months later, then they moved me into personnel. So I did personnel for that shop then, for the mechanical group. And moved with them.
That's what we call HR now?
Yeah,
Human resources?
Right. Yes, yeah. So
So you dealt with all the people?
Worked with them for as personnel clerk and then moved into the supervisory position after a couple of years. So then I was supervisor for the personnel and timekeepers for the mechanical group. So we had about 4 personnel clerks and about 4 timekeepers.
Oh,
Like
how many people at that time were on that Mare Island? Do you remember?
About 10,000 civilian employees.
Okay.
We just, different groups had their own personnel and timekeeping area. So we just took care of in the production shops.
Yeah. That's a big
It gave me good knowledge. So when I came to do volunteer work, I kind of had a knowledge of a lot of the things they did.
Yeah. And
some of our volunteers now that we have at the former museum, they still come in on Wednesdays because they are doing a lot of cleaning out and sorting and stuff. And 2 of them were in the machine shop at that time. So, So they're retired machinists. They're there. They can do anything.
Still want a connection with the island.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So, there are 4 4 of them that worked in the machine shop. So, and they've been there a long time, so they're just giving back. They're proud of all the work they did.
Yeah.
Say if they worked at Mare Island, they could work anywhere because they're very skilled.
So the standards of the work here.
Yeah, the really standard and they go through the apprenticeship, the skills they picked up that they learned and everything. They're very skilled people.
When you started working here, did they give you like a overview of the history of Mare Island when you first started? Do you remember, or they just threw you in here? Or?
You just kind of pick it up, really. As you go.
They just kind of train you and you start working.
Yeah, train you in your job. It's a lot of on-the-job training.
Because even by the 50s, it had been in business for like almost 100 years, right?
Yeah.
1854?
Well, of course, when my husband started in 58, they just started new construction. Nuclear construction. They just launched the first nuclear ship when he started.
Was that in the whole fleet here, the first one ever?
No, the nuclear Nautilus was the first nuclear sub, and that was built in Groton, Connecticut.
Okay.
Mare Island built the Sargo. The Sargo was the second nuclear.
Wow.
Sargo was Mare Island's first nuclear sub.
That must have been a big deal.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Yeah. I didn't know when they were launching ships. I was home with kids. My husband never told me, oh, you could go downtown and look across the channel even, they're launching a ship. Yeah. And I look at the pictures and half the town's there.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah. Huh. I imagine the security level was very high.
Oh, yes.
Very high,
yes,
right?
Yes. Yeah. Had to be. Yeah, you had to be very careful. When I worked at Hamilton, I started right in the mid-50s, and Korean War had just ended, or the conflict and stuff. Mm-hmm. So they were telling me about the security there then. I mean, even at the end of the day, you put your carbon paper in the safe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The carbon paper. Wow.
Yeah, you had to really be careful.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a special envelope to put if we worked on any classified documents.
Right.
We had an envelope to store it in, in the safe.
Okay.
But they said during the war you had to be really cautious.
Yeah, you never knew who was going to be a spy or not, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it had very strict rules, and only officers carried top secret. I could carry maybe confidential or secret to another office, but top secret had to be done by officers. And there were
different levels of secrecy.
Right.
Top was the most.
Yeah. I had a top secret.
Was there one above top or no? No, that was it.
I think here there was, called ocean engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I never got into that, but they had to go through special, answer a lot of questions and questionnaire and stuff to even get into that.
Did they have it? Do you know if Maryland had any issues of spies or espionage or stuff like that?
I suppose they did.
Not many people working here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they did, that's not something to talk about.
Right.
But they did have.
Exactly.
They did have the security people and stuff.
Yeah.
We'd have the drug dog that would come around and check things once in a while.
Yeah.
The drug dog always sat down by the copy machine. I guess there was toner and stuff in the copy machine.
Oh, the smell of the toner. That's funny.
Yeah.
Cool. So how did you get involved in the church and the cemetery?
Well, when I first came, I started as a tour guide. When I first volunteered, I started as a tour guide.
Okay.
So trained under a tour guide director, coordinator, and I became his assistant. And then when he couldn't do it anymore, I took over as the tour guide coordinator.
Is it a lot of people at that time?
Oh yeah,
touring.
Yeah, we had a lot of people touring. We had quite a few tour guides, and then I started also working as a docent, which meaning you worked if there were weddings or events at the mansion or the chapel. Mm-hmm. You oversaw those, and then I became also and then worked under the head docent. And when he died, I took over his job too. And then
Okay.
another man and his wife did the scheduling and the contracts and all that. And when they left, I also worked alongside them. So then I was already trained when they left. So
Yeah.
I took over that one too. So I became tours and docent coordinators and, in charge of all that and all the events, all the parties, all that. Just kind of fell into
Was
everything.
this after the island was closed, or is it still active?
This was after it closed.
After it's closed. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't start till 98.
Okay. 'Cause
Yeah.
I was,
So, yeah.
I was like, who are you touring if it's active?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then, and then when the museum opened, I was there from the beginning helping set that up and working along that. And my predecessor passed away, and then I took over the museum too. So then I was manager of the museum
Oh, wow.
and did a lot of the displays and stuff. The cemetery, my friend told me, because so many of the tombstones were where you couldn't read them anymore,
From
and she was
weathering,
trying to document. She wanted to document people buried there,
Right.
but she didn't type. And I said, "Well, I can type, so I can help you." And so I started helping her. People buried at the cemetery.
Oh, wow.
Now that's our second.
It was volume 2.
Yeah, volume 1 wasn't as inclusive as I wanted it. At first, we did just 1/5 volume of Section A, which was the officer area,
Okay.
and she didn't want to publish. And it was kind of costly just to print up,
I bet.
and it was just a thin volume. And I always wanted to publish, and I always wanted to put everything in one book, which she was in favor of too. And so we did volume 2, and Tony, who's down there on the third,
Yeah.
is a computer expert, and he did all the formatting for us. And he helped me, get the pictures in and combine everything into one. And there had been some fires out at the cemetery, plus the Army Reserve did a lot of renovation out there. So I wanted to include all that. And so this includes all that, plus we indexed it, which the first volume we didn't index. So
The amount of work involved in doing that.
Well, thanks to Tony, couldn't probably have done it without him.
Yeah, that was a lot of work.
Yeah, Tony did a lot
Did you
of it.
do it all in chronological order too? Or-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's Section A. Yeah, Section A, each section is in chronological.
Yeah.
So Section A is the officer area. And then Section B
Wow.
is over on the south side of the cemetery. And it's the oldest area. And then you go C, and then D, E, F is the last part of the.
So who are the couple prominent people buried here? And
Well,
what
up
are
in
their
A
stories?
is the daughter of Francis Scott Key, and
Wow.
who wrote the Star Spangled Banner.
Really?
And there's about 7 members of Francis Scott Key's family in the cemetery, because Daniel Turner was Anna's husband, and Daniel Turner was a civil engineer who came with Farragut to start Mare Island. So there are about 5 buildings attributed to Daniel Turner, including the former museum building, which goes back to 1855.
Wow.
And then he died in 1860. So, and his wife and their son, also Daniel, is there, and his wife and another daughter-in-law, and son-in-law and his wife. And so there are 7 members of his family. And then also their maid, and who is Sarah Turner, who was African-American.
I recognize the name.
Yeah. See, they came from North Carolina. So when people came from the South, they brought their servants with them, who probably in the South were slaves, but not here. And they were actually, by this time, she was aged, and they took care of her.
Okay.
and she was just one of the family.
Yeah.
And she's not buried right by their grave. She's buried over next to Chaplain McAllister's grave. And
Now he's the
chaplain that built the chapel.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, but she's over on that side. But her name, they took on the name of their master, so her name is Sarah Turner. And so she's there too.
A lot of history there.
Yeah.
I know there's some Russian
Yeah,
sailors there too, right?
that's what that is. The Russians impressed me. They would come.
This is the pictures
Yeah.
of some of the Russian
Yeah.
ceremony.
Yeah, they would come out every year to honor burials of 1863. I told them, I said, you really impressed me because as you can see the condition of the cemetery, yet Americans don't pay much attention to their dead.
Right.
But you come every year and to honor people who died in 1863. Plus, they
bring all these people over.
yeah,
too?
yeah,
Wow.
we'd have about 50 people. At first, I had to escort them, and so I would clear them in through security into because at first the gate wasn't wide open when Mare Island first closed.
Right.
So I would call security and get them cleared in as far as the museum, and then I would escort them to the cemetery. And even when I didn't have to escort them, I still attended because it was interesting.
Yeah.
And they would bring, it was all in Russian. They would bring, the consulate would come and the consulate provided the refreshments. And their color guard were young people from one of their Russian churches.
Wow.
And yeah.
Would they come from Russia or?
No, San Francisco, when the consulate was there. And then that all ended when the consulate was kicked out of San Francisco.
When was that?
And it was several years ago. They were no longer there anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very, very interesting to attend. So I was always there with them, and I got a lot of history that way too from them because we were always told that in 1863 the Russian ships were in San Francisco and there was a big fire in the financial district, and the Russian the fire department was losing everything was burning down.
Yeah.
And they hear all this noise behind them and look, and here's all the Russian sailors coming to help them. They've got hoses and buckets and everything, and shovels and stuff.
Yeah.
And 6 of them died in a building when it collapsed that they were in. Well, the Russians have told me that they didn't die of the fire. They helped fight the fire, but and some of them maybe were injured in the fire. One of them died of typhoid, and that's buried there, and one was washed out to sea, and there were other deaths. And the Russians continue to check the manifests, and they know the names of the ships, and it's all in there.
Wow.
And they know the names of the ships that the Russians were on. And by checking the names of the people on those ships and stuff, they can kind of identify, because 3 of the graves have the names on and 3 say Russian sailor. They couldn't match the body with the name.
Right.
But they think from checking the manifests that they know who the names of those 3 are.
Yeah.
But I mean, they never stop.
Do they still come?
No, because the consulate's not in San Francisco anymore.
They don't come at all, though.
No, they were all sent back to Russia.
Yeah.
So, but Russia, the money to pay for the new tombstones came from Russia.
Okay.
Yeah. So the tombstones.
So when are the new tombstones? So the recent or?
Yeah. Let me see. It's section.
So do they have any contact with the cemetery at all anymore?
No,
Because
if they continue to contact, it would be me.
Okay.
They used to, but no, not anymore. But anyhow, that's all about the Russians there, and here's the new tombstones.
Okay. Wow.
The Lena came, and it had just gotten here.
Is that a ship?
Yeah.
Okay.
And So that's one of the graves right there. The Lena ship came, and they were told they either had to leave within 48 hours, or the Japanese-Russo War was going on.
Oh.
And they had to remain through the remainder of the war, or else leave within 48 hours.
Oh.
And they said their boilers were all blown out. Their shit, they may have sabotaged them to stay, but they couldn't leave, and it was examined, and it was true
Okay.
that the ship was in the condition that they could leave.
Right.
So they got to stay, and they had a lot of concerts and parties and entertained in San Francisco. And one of them married the shipyard commander's daughter,
Oh, wow.
and took English lessons from her and stuff. And
This is the early 1900s?
yeah, this is 1900.
Okay.
Yeah. This one died 1905.
Yeah.
And one of them,
Are there,
the hatch fell on him and hit him on the head,
oh man,
and the other one got sick.
not a good way to go.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's
Is the cemetery still being used, or?
yeah. Well, there's no new burials. It
Okay.
closed in 1921.
So
The
no-
VA has just taken over the cemetery, just
Oh.
recently.
Oh, really?
So
They plans for it? Upgrade
yeah,
it?
so yeah, they've already started that. Well, the Army Reserves did a lot of upgrading. They put in irrigation and
Oh,
a
great.
lot of upgrading. That's why I want to cover it in the book. And there's Memorial Day, Veterans Day. They wanted to include that. There were fires out there. That's the fires.
If people want to purchase this, where is this book available?
Here or Vallejo Museum, or you can go on Amazon. But yeah, the Army Reserves did a fantastic job fixing up the cemetery. New fencing, and they cleaned all the tombstones and everything.
That's great.
So yeah, they did a terrific job on it.
And that's you said there's a south portion of the cemetery?
Yeah, it's laid out like this. The
Yeah.
south portion is over here.
Okay.
North portion is over here. Section F is the north side, and Section F is the last burials, mostly Asian flu,
Oh, well,
because the cemetery closed in 1921.
yeah.
So
Do
mostly
you have a yearly ceremony that goes on there?
every Memorial Day, every Veterans Day.
Oh, okay, twice.
Well, the Memorial Day services started out there in 1873
Okay.
and have been every year. We were, the foundation was requested by the Vallejo mayor to take over the services when Mare Island closed.
Okay.
So then we did it. Our president of our foundation led it every year, and we'd have Sea Cadets do color guard. We still do.
Mm-hmm.
And then Peggy and I would be there, and we'd usually help out with a little bit of history and then when our president was failing, well, I'd have to stand next to him and kind of feed information to him a little bit. And then I kind of took over for a little bit, and then the city took it over. And so the city then handled the lady who's the vice mayor, or was the
The
vice
city
mayor.
of Vallejo?
Yeah, and they took over doing the ceremonies. But of course, Veterans Day, the year after Armistice Day, so 1919 probably was the first ceremony for Veterans Day. And but the Navy always had service every year, and we have too now. So now this will be the first time with the VA, so I'll be anxious to see how the VA
Do you
does.
get a good amount of turnout?
Yeah.
For that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Now we always had about 50 people.
Yeah.
And we always laid a wreath at the Boston Monument.
Right.
I requested that instead of us providing a wreath at the Boston Monument, it just didn't make sense anymore. For them, since they took it over, to provide one wreath for everybody, because
Okay.
it's full of all those heroes, to have one wreath.
So what, can
For
you tell me
everybody.
the significance of the Boston Monument?
There was in 1892 there was a big explosion. The USS Boston was at Mare Island for repairs.
Okay.
And to give the sailors something to do, they sent them over to unload ammunition. They were not trained to do that. They didn't have the proper clothing on, the proper shoes on, or anything. And I understand there were a couple of Dutchmen that they were playing around a little bit, and somebody dropped something and it exploded, killed 15 of them.
Wow.
13 of them died that day instantly. 2 lingered in the hospital in extreme pain. One just begged, just shoot me. They were in so much pain.
Yeah.
They died the following day, but wood embedded in them and stuff. It was really gruesome.
Yeah, I bet.
To read about. And
so that's the monument for them.
Yeah. So their names are all on the monument, and then they have individual graves too in front of it.
Okay.
And they were just young men.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So there were many firsts on Mare Island because Mare Island was the first naval base on the West Coast. So you had many things on Mare Island. The biggest, the oldest, or something west of the Mississippi. The chapel is the oldest naval chapel in the United States.
Right.
And that one has been verified. Because our chapel opened in 1901. Annapolis Chapel is 1908. They had an earlier chapel that was torn down. West Point has the older military chapel, but we have the oldest naval chapel.
We're in competition.
Yeah.
You said your brother-in-law worked here also, is that right?
Yeah, so did my brother. My brother-in-law became superintendent of the boiler shop.
Oh, really?
He was a boilermaker in the Navy, a Mare Island sailor. And then he got out of the Navy, and his father before him worked here. In fact,
what do boilermakers do? They literally make the boilers?
Yeah, something in the boiler shop. I don't know exactly.
A lot of welding.
He was in the engine room and stuff on the ship when he was in the Navy. So it just kind of, that was a good trade for him. And he became superintendent of the boiler shop eventually. My brother was in the pattern shop. And he came out of high school.
Oh, wow.
No military time. Started out of high school. And his pay started a little over $4 an hour because pattern makers were a skilled trade. My husband started as a machinist with 4 years military time behind him. And he started $1.98 an hour.
Wow. $4 an hour is a good pay.
Yeah. Because they were considered a skilled trade.
Wow.
Yeah. And he was here 6 years. And then he decided to do other things. So they had a RIF and a reduction in force. And they were going to let him go on to the wood shop, which he had skills in. I mean, all his life, he was always hammering something.
Mm-hmm. But were you here when they announced the closure of Mare Island?
No. We both left in 89.
Oh, okay.
My husband retired in March 89. I left the end of May of 89.
Was it still...
It was still going, yeah.
Did you have any inkling that it might close?
No, they started about 91, 92, 93 was certain. 93, they were doing SOS rallies, Save Our Shipyard rallies.
Really?
Trying to save it and stuff. But it was pretty certain that time.
Did Congress make that decision?
Well, it would be in Washington with Clinton's administration, and they were closing down all the bases, closing everything down on the West Coast.
That affected all the city of Vallejo.
Yeah. Well, Vallejo went bankrupt for a while.
Yeah.
I did one display I got started in was the Japanese display, and it was really exciting because several years ago I was contacted by a lady from Japan. And she was coming to San Francisco for some consortium. She was a retired teacher going back for something in Japan. So she was preparing. Yeah. And the Kanran Maru had been at Mare Island, which was a Japanese ship. It has Maru at the end, the Japanese ship.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And in 1860. And she wanted to know when the Japanese came in 1860, what buildings were here, and how they were treated, and all that. Well, a lot of that's in one of the books. And so I started researching and going online and then researching what it said. And so I was ready for her when she came, and the museum building was one of them that was there at that time. And I had pictures of the previous mansions, not the one standing now. And so we spent some time together. And then she gave my name to some others in Japan. And because you had the consulate in San Francisco, so that's what brought them to this area.
Right.
For different seminars, consortiums, or whatever in San Francisco. And so they knew anybody who was born in Japan knows about the Kanran Maru.
Oh, wow.
Historic ship.
Okay.
It brought the embassy. Well, it accompanied another American ship that brought the embassy that was coming to sign treaties with America and Japan. And after that, I would frequently get Japanese visitors that the consulate would tell them to come over here.
Oh, wow.
And as they came in the door, they would say, we came about the Kanran Maru. So I had developed a display on.
Is that in the museum?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And I had developed a display on it. So
wow.
Most of the stuff I got online. And so I had a big, thick file on it.
Yeah.
And so, and most of the things they could go online and get the same information and same pictures, but they were impressed with them and they would take pictures of it and everything. And I had some visitors one time who were Japanese, but they were all American born.
Okay.
And they were from a rest home, residential care facility.
Yes.
They didn't know anything about the Kanran Maru, but they were all American born.
Right.
So I gave them Japanese history. Yeah. But the Japanese, they knew about it right away. And we had two.
They taught it in their schools.
I guess. Yeah. And one of our volunteers had a Japanese wife, and she's passed on now, but he's still one of our tour guides. And I asked him, did your wife know about the Kanran Maru? And he said, yeah, she did. She talked about it sometimes. And we currently have another. We also have another man who's retired Navy, and his wife was Japanese, or is Japanese. And he said, yeah, I brought her through the museum. And she said, oh, that's a historic ship. So, the Japanese they know about the ship. So that was quite interesting to me. So I would get visitors. One time I had a whole school group from Japan, teenagers.
Wow.
They were on a tour. They were in San Francisco. The consulate brought them. She came herself. She brought them over. Didn't tell me ahead of time.
Oh, no.
They just walked in. And so I couldn't really converse with them. They couldn't speak any English.
Right.
They had to go through their translator.
Right.
Yeah. And
how long ago was that?
Just a few years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Before the pandemic.
You still might get visits then.
Well, not anymore. Yeah. But that was, it was before the pandemic, a few years before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was quite interesting too.
Yeah. That's a good one.
And so I have some of the souvenirs I boxed away, but a couple of them I took home that were given to me directly. One's a glass, and they have my name etched in it.
Oh, wow.
So they put my name in the glass. He was joking around, and he said, now when you drink your sake, which I don't drink, my name is, as you tip the glass up, you can see my name in the bottom of the glass. And then, so he gave that to me. And then a Japanese monk gave me a book. It's all written in Japanese, but in the back of the book, he wrote my name in Japanese.
Oh, wow.
So I look at it and see.
You're like a famous person in Japan, huh?
So that was kind of fun. Yeah.
Did this happen by the lady calling you one day?
Yeah.
Wow.
Turning my name into others. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. That was really interesting.
What do you think the future of the island is?
It's building gradually. There's a lot of private companies here.
Yeah.
And a lot of residents here. So
you think it's going to become a big small town eventually, or?
Well, it has its own zip code.
Yeah.
It has a separate zip code.
Yeah.
It's part of Vallejo, but Vallejo has 5 zip codes.
Okay.
So Mare Island has its own zip code and stuff. If they get stores in, but there's no amenities, there's no gas station or grocery store.
Right.
They've talked about them from time to time, but there's still none of that. I mean, Lennar, when they were here, were all for the former prison, was a big historic building from the 1800s, and the brick part. And,
is that here on the island?
well-known naval prison. Yeah.
Where is that?
The building's still there, and it's over on Aswar Street, and it's still there. But they, it was one the Navy would say you didn't want to get there because it was a tough prison. You worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were well known for raising produce and dairy products and everything for the state fairs and for the residents here and stuff. But I was just reading, I just filed a paper on them a little bit ago. And, some of the escapees and different things.
That was a military prison?
Yeah.
Okay.
Naval, well guarded by Marines.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it built about 1868, I think, closed 1946.
Okay.
But because they were going more for rehab then instead of punishing and stuff,
right.
More for rehab things.
Right.
So it closed. But the building's still there. So when Lennar was here, they were saying, well, it's a historic. What's it going? It's just sitting there. It's contaminated. You can't go in and stuff. Tear it down. Architectural Heritage said, no, it's historic.
Mm-hmm.
So these developers are cleaning it up and getting it ready for occupancy of something. I don't know exactly what, but something going in. But
still has all the cells in it and all that?
It was gutted out.
Oh, okay.
After it closed and became a print shop. When the Navy was still here, they used it for a print shop. And so just recently, you could look and see the bars on the windows, but all those have been removed now because they're remodeling the building and getting ready for something. So this company, instead of tearing down the historic building, they're doing something with it. So that's good.
In the museum, it's never going to open again?
No, not in that building.
Gotta
not
move
unless a new location is found.
That's sad.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hard work you did for that place.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever let people in there? Or
No, we can't. We're not allowed to.
Oh,
they don't even like us working in there.
Wow.
They say it's contaminated. You're in a death trap, and if there's another earthquake, you're in a death trap, and all this.
What is it contaminated from?
It was built originally with unreinforced masonry, but that's all. The Navy reinforced that. But you have asbestos.
Right.
And all the old buildings have asbestos.
Yeah, of course.
PCB, asbestos, and all the cancer-causing stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, when we worked in there, because my office was in there after the pipe shop moved out, our personnel office was in there, and I remember them tunneling off using real heavy plastic and making like a big tunnel you walk through to block you off from asbestos so they could clean up the outer part.
Yeah, I guess once you start breaking it loose.
Yeah. So, but you have a lot of things. And now, earthquakes, there's so many leaks now. When it rains, you get puddles all over the place.
Have they talked about moving it to a real good...
Well, that's what I say. They're looking for another building, but
because there's a lot of historical.
Yeah, I know. Any historic buildings would have the same problem with asbestos and stuff. It would have to be retrofitted and all kinds of stuff. And then what you can afford
is that in the budget? Yeah.
So they're looking around. We had a big garage sale last year.
Oh yeah.
And we couldn't sell that, but we made about $14,000.
Wow, that's good.
And
people love military
because we had no overhead or anything.
Yeah.
We're all volunteers, and our wonderful volunteer Wednesday volunteer guys, they did all that.
You don't do garage sales anymore, though, huh?
We're going to have another one. We call it garage sale, flea market, whatever, to get rid of a lot of things that we couldn't use.
How
And
many are you gonna have
a
left?
lot of books, some T-shirts, hats,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, but also a lot of equipment, tools and equipment and stuff that wasn't Navy stuff.
Do you have that scheduled yet or no?
No, we wait for nicer weather probably, but
Yeah.
that's what the guys are doing today.
Oh, okay.
They're also is sorting out what else could go in a sale. But yeah, and that finances having the library here.
Right.
That's how we pay the rent for here.
Okay.
So he's got the rent covered for here through doing that.
Yeah, that's a good sale.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time
Mm-hmm.
and your stories.
Yeah.